Welcome to the Mental Health Mukbang, where we try to make mental health easily digestible. My name is Jed. I'm a therapist from Los Angeles, California. I've got kimchi jjigae that I made, and yeah.
Okay. I'm Jeanie Chang, LMFT from Raleigh, and today I'm eating leftover pizza that my son gave me. Gotta take what I'm given.
And I'm Jenny Wang from Houston, Texas. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm eating these crispy crepe egg rolls that I don't know. You know what it is, or if you don't, try it.
The ones that come in the metal tin, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Christopher Vo. I'm an LMFT, also based out of Houston, Texas. Today I'm eating these beautiful Stroop waffles. And today we'll be tackling the model minority myth. It's something that's probably affected all of us, and something that I knew about on a superficial level and always thought of in a very positive way, probably until my early 20s. So we'll start with the basics. What is the model minority myth? Jeanie? Jenny?
All right, let's do it. Okay. So, the model minority myth was first coined in the 1960s by a white sociologist. And this was after World War II, after the Japanese internment camps. And it was in reference to observations made of Japanese Americans at that time. And so, coming out of these internment camps, in which these Japanese Americans had their entire resources, financial, businesses, homes taken away from them, they seem to be able to kind of reclimb these ladders of financial success, economic success, and kind of affluence. And so it was used to describe this interesting phenomenon in which these Asian Americans or Asians were able to climb these kind of social ladders without utilizing social welfare services or relying on the government. And the effect that it had on kind of all people of color was that it started to create a divide between Asian Americans and Black, Latino, other marginalized groups, in a way to kind of illegitimize the civil rights and social justice struggles of people, of Black and brown individuals. And so we're going to talk about how it kind of has created a divide, but also created a lot of harm in the psyches of Asian Americans, even to this day. Right. So hopefully that was okay.
Yeah, that was brilliant, right? I've said this before that it's rooted in evil. No, I'm kidding. It's rooted in a harmful or just rooted in not healthy perspective. So my just belief is because of that, it's had ramifications over time on, I don't want to be general, but on me. But I guess starting off with what our own experiences with model minority. I think it's interesting that Chris said the same thing to me. I grew up definitely experiencing it, but not knowing that was what it was called until college. And even then it wasn't fully grasped until I was actually in graduate school to really understand that concept. It's not really said in history books, but growing up, model minority, depending on where you're raised. I grew up in a very white suburban area, so we stood out because we were the token Asians. But how the model minority helped us, or the image was, oh, Asians, they're good. They don't cause trouble, and they're pretty quiet. So I want to say I remember feeling that and having a good first impression from everybody else, meaning they saw us and immediately felt good first impression. However, I believe that based on just the way my parents raised me and how they felt the pressure themselves culturally and also what's expected of us in the environment that we were in, I can definitely say that my home environment was extremely stressful, without making it sound like it was terrible. My parents, very loving, and didn't know any better except to translate the Korean culture into where I lived in outside of Wilmington, Delaware, very small state. But I want to say, I just remember thinking I was always walking on eggshells. Am I doing something wrong? Do I get the right grades? that's very stressful for a child. And that's all I remember, practicing piano till I was so tired. And I did not want that for my kids. But that to me is my experience with the model minority. And even today, feeling like I get triggered a little bit when my parents call me, or I'll be like, oh, do I look okay? I mean, they can't even see me, but it's just that still perfectionism that was just brought up, or it was just completely fostered in my home environment. And again, even outside my home environment, to be perfect, you
Right.
know? So that was my experience.
I wanted to piggyback on some of what Jenny said of those origins, right? And I feel like the origins of the model minority myth and coming out of that Japanese era, you know, it allowed imperialistic culture to kind of erase some of the atrocities that they committed, right? It allowed them to say, yeah, there was internment camps. Yeah, there was not only one but two nuclear bombs. But look at how we as white saviors have helped these yellow people really build themselves up and better than where they were, right? And also remembering that this only applies, it started out with Japanese Americans, but it really applies with East Asians. It's not even inclusive of all Asians. That wasn't its purpose in the first place, right? But yeah, I did want to get that in before we move on to Jed and your experience with the mono minority myth.
So, I think I don't know if I've said this before, but I always feel like my experience has always been kind of an outlier, just because of the way that I grew up and the experiences that I had. That I never really felt the overt struggles of that were associated with like the model minority, even though I had grown up in the South. And I mean, it's like I never really felt too out of place. I never really felt like I had anything to prove to anyone other than, I guess, my friends or the people that I was associated with. Because, yeah, it's just, I just felt that I belonged wherever I was. And I don't know if that's because of the way that my parents experienced things, because I will say that when I talk to them about racism, they don't ever give me any examples of times that they ever felt like they had experienced racism, or that they ever felt any like they were anybody else but themselves. Maybe that's just because they had very well developed self images or whatever, and maybe it was just the people that they met when they got here. But even though they immigrated to like Missouri and like Mississippi, or I don't know specifically, but they were in those places at some point, and they never gave me any examples of times that they felt like they were being like people were being racist towards them. At least not with the people that they were associated with. I'm sure that there were like things that they had gone through that they don't tell me about, or that they just don't remember because they were just like passing whatever. There's like, okay, whatever, like they brush it off, or that it just didn't register for them. And it's not that my parents don't, like, my parents went to like graduate school and school here, so they're relatively educated, and so I think maybe it's because they were more fluent in English that he could get by. And but with that, like, it's hard for me to talk sometimes to them about it because it's just kind of out of their scope. And then after coming to California, like I'm in a predominantly Asian area, and basically when we came to California, my brother thought that we had moved to China. And because of how many Asian people were here and how all of my parents' new friends were Chinese, and they're like, oh, so like he was like, oh, we're in China now. When are we going to go back to America? And even now, he's probably more, I guess you could say it nicely. I guess you could say he's more acculturated than I am, or anybody else in my family for that matter. But that's also just because he also had Asian friends growing up, like. Almost all of our friends were all Asian because of the school that we went to. But
when you say acculturated, can you explain a little bit about what you mean?
I think he identifies less with Eastern culture and ideals. You know, he's the one that's questioning all of the things that we do, like why do we do this, why do we do that, right? Like why do we think this way, or like whatever. And he's always been that kind of person, and so we have good conversations. about stuff like that. But he's the one who speaks the worst Chinese. He's the one that just like doesn't really think, like his opinions on family are slightly different than ours, you know. So it is that kind of he there's more of the American culture in him than there is of like more like traditional Chinese culture. Not that he's still pretty Asian. Like you can't separate that part out of you.
Sure.
But yeah, our experience, or at least I'm going to speak for myself, right? My experience with the model minority myth was different, right? It wasn't, because a lot of what the model minority myth did, in my opinion, is reinforce values that Eastern societies already had, or like things that we value: hard work, family, kind of laying low, making sure that we take care of our like own business, right? Not getting involved in everything else, right?
Get money.
Yeah, right. Work hard, get money, take care of your family, and those are all like great American ideals, right? And so we kind of fit in with that, but to reinforce that is part of. I will say that there are other cultures who value those things, right? But for some reason, we as Asians were given this like, oh, look at them, they're doing better financially, and they just took that at face value, because I mean, we don't have as long of a history of being in the United States as say like black people, and we never had to, like, as Asians, we never had that systemic like oppression that happened during slavery. I mean, we still experience systemic oppression now, but it's different, and we see that as colorism. That shows when we talk about like South Asians, when we talk about Southeast Asians, anybody that's basically not East Asian, right, receives less of that benefit of the doubt compared to some of us East Asians. And we recognize that as part of that minority, the model minority myth. It's because fundamentally it was for East Asians because of the way that
it lumps
we look.
us like we're all the same.
Yeah,
and
right?
we're very diverse.
Yeah, until suddenly recently people were like, oh, just kidding, there are more Asians out there, you know? And suddenly it just kind of like, oh, well, and I think that society has been coping with that, but less on the societal side, more on the personal side, is that there are those pressures of feeling like you have to achieve, like Jeanie said. It comes from a slightly different place, just because all of us Asians are already like that. And then I think for the way that we experienced, or the way that I experienced it here in my area, was usually in the form of like the expectations of the school administrators. I mean, when you have a school full of Asians, you expect all of them to like do well, and then at some point you're just like, okay, we're just gonna take these group of kids and they're gonna do even better. And then I think there is that expectation, and I was part of that GATE program. I was supposed to go the super like academic route, but then I experienced some hiccups when it came to algebra, geometry, and then like I kind of fell off the tail end of that, and I think a lot of that made me kind of question my own like ability, and I had some self-esteem issues growing up because of that. I was just like, oh, so I'm not as good as my friends who are all like eventually went to like calculus A, B, B, C people, versus me. I just ended up, you know what, I'm not gonna do that, I'm just gonna take stats.
That's not fair to you as an individual, right?
Yeah.
Because your ability is your ability. You shouldn't be held to some expectation of a herd. That doesn't make any sense, especially when you're talking about education, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of what we're talking about. I feel like all four of us have experienced that in some form of manner of, instead of meeting you where you are, giving you the help that you needed, it was, nah, they're Asian, so they obviously got it.
Yeah, right. They're Asian. They'll figure it out. They'll like, their parents will hire a tutor or something. And that was really popular around like where I'm at, because everybody went to after school. Everybody had a tutor. Everybody was taking elite and getting SAT classes in high school. You know, that was the thing. And so I think budding therapist Jed in high school was like talking to his friends who were like not as academic, and they were having struggles, and they're like just like, yeah, like I'm a B student, you know, but like I have all of this pressure that's put on me, and the teachers are just like, you're supposed to be one of them, you know. And I'm not gonna say that like all of the teachers were like that. There were a few, but I know that a lot of the teachers that we had were like super supportive people, and they would go out of their way to help us out after school if we needed it. But there were others who were just like, nah, they'll go on cruise control because the Asian kids will take care of the class. Like, we'll just like split them up, and then like if you're doing a group thing, like they'll figure it out. You know, they're gonna be okay. And I think that wasn't helpful for a lot of my peers, even if it didn't necessarily directly impact my own situation.
You can really see the effects, and
I could definitely see what was going on. So yeah, I could definitely.
The tag team, it's still going on today.
It's true. It's true.
I work having kids and applying to college and still working with a lot of that population, it still very much exists today. Yeah. Like, oh, you should, you know, and you know that thought of Asians are held to a higher standard of college admission. They won't admit that, but all of that, I've experienced it as a parent, and I see it, which also frustrates me. You know, it's like, interesting. So you're expected to get a certain grade, and if you don't, then they'll be like, oh, then yeah, you can't go into this school or whatever. I could go off on that, but it's unfortunate that it still very much exists today. So I feel like I try to do a lot of educating on what that looks like.
Oh yeah.
But I'm diverting a little bit. So
that's a whole other conversation that we can have about like college admissions and all that, because it's as Asians, we're in a really weird place when it comes to affirmative action, and it is a hot topic. And
use that word, but I was thinking it just because I wasn't trying to go there.
But
it's different episode, though.
Different episode. Definitely different episode. Sorry, Chris. We can't.
All right, Chris, go ahead.
No, a lot of times, even with that affirmative action conversation, we're used as a pawn in white versus black or other minorities, right? Yeah. It's frustrating, because I feel like in my experience growing up, I constantly was reminded that you are not one of those other minorities, the bad minorities. But I was also constantly reminded that you'll never be one of us as well, right? When I say us, I mean like white people, right? So I remember, you know, facing a lot of instances of racism. You know, I remember Homecoming King, comedy special by Hassan Minhaj. There was a particular scene in there that really, really moved me. And that was the scene where they broke the windows in his car shortly after 9/11. And he watched his dad like sweep up this broken glass, and his dad's response was, no, there is no justice. We're not going to do anything about this. This is just the price you pay to belong in white society, right? And we had that happen to us multiple times. Our windows broken, you know, our house is broken into just to be picked on, not even to take anything, just to be destructive, right? I also feel like that model minority myth also allows white culture to kind of erase racism or aggression towards Asians, because it's, oh, you guys have it so good, it's not that big of a deal, stop complaining, right? I remember in high school me missing a day of class. I came into school the next day, and my friend was like, hey, you won't believe what happened. We had a substitute teacher, he's calling roll, and he said, hey, where's that Chinese kid, that Chang kid, right? And I was like, what? Why? You know, I was just shocked. And I remember telling a teacher that I really liked and really got along with this story. And I was like, this racist guy, like, what can I do? And his response was, I don't think that's racism. That's just ignorance. And I was like, no, that's racism, you know? But subconsciously, his brain was going, well, it's not slavery, right? It's not gerrymandering. It's just some words, right? I'm like, no, man, that's racism. So it's that constant reminder of just you're not enough, right? Another example that really highlighted that weird division of where we stood was when I moved down here into Houston. I went to a party once, right? And I went with my friend who was a black kid. We walked into the house, and you know, all the kids were super welcoming, right? Hey, what's up? Da da da. Make yourself at home. Here's a beer. Blah blah. And then my friend goes out to the back to smoke a cigarette. Don't smoke, by the way, kids. But the second he went out that back door, they looked at me and were like, ha ha ha, who invited that? Guess what word they used here? The N word with the hard R, right? Thinking I would be okay with the racism against this black kid who I went with, right? It was that, hey, you're good enough to hear the shit that we talk about other races, but also know that we're also going to talk shit about you, but it's cool because you're one of us ish, right?
Yep.
Heavy stuff. But yeah, like we're all saying, it's there's good and bad, right? It helped build a little bit of acceptance. It helped open some doors, but it also created what we call like the bamboo ceiling, right? Can any of you guys talk about what that is exactly?
Jeanie, that's all you.
Well, I was going to say equivalent to what the glass ceiling, right? In leadership organizations, I feel like I myself, because I do have a corporate background, experienced it where they thought, whoa, Jeannie's talking and putting up a fight, and I was like, you know what? After a while, what happens is, I think it's twofold. You hit a bamboo ceiling because people expect you to behave a certain way. It's almost like that. Have you heard the term double bind? Where it's like it's two different communication patterns on one. So you're set to be if you want to be in leadership, speak up, and take initiative. Then you do it, and then they're like, whoa. That was my experience with the bamboo ceiling, where I always took the initiative, wanted more, said I wanted to do this, and I'm just talking personally, and I've seen it. But from a personal point, I just went, after a while, you're almost penalized for speaking up because they don't see you're supposed to do that. And again, I'm also talking from a perspective of female, Asian American woman.
Yeah.
And so I call myself the troublemaker in corporate, but that's okay. I mean, but my experience today has made me effective where I am today. But breaking that bamboo ceiling, by the way, there's a great book. It's actually right here on my desk by Jane Hyun. Do you guys know her?
I've heard of the book, yeah.
Great book. So she wrote this, and she talks exactly about that. But yeah, it's like you hit this glass ceiling. That's the white term.
Yeah.
Bamboo ceiling is our term for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's that concept of like Asians are always going to be pulling all of the work in the group project, right? But
they won't be the leaders. Or they won't.
Yeah, absolutely.
They won't be the stars. And I always fought that, and it did get me in trouble. I never got fired. But I was in trouble because they were like, Jeanie, why are you the only one speaking up? I go, I don't know. Why am I speaking up? And I love Jenny encouraging me once, saying, I like her outspokenness. But you do hit that, and that's the double bind I get. They tell you, do it, take initiative. Oh no, don't, Jeanie, don't stop talking. But that might be a whole nother topic, bamboo ceiling.
Yeah, and I can't wait to
when Are we just like gonna open up all these like episodes? It's like we're gonna talk about this one day.
We're gonna talk about all of this. Going on to okay, so that's the model minority, but we haven't heard from Jenny. Just your own experience with the model minority stereotype.
I think for me, I didn't realize it was a real thing until probably closer to college. I didn't have the language for it, at least.
Sure.
But I grew up in a predominantly Jewish, Italian, kind of white community. There were not lots of Asians. The Asians that were there were what we like to call whitewashed, myself included, in the sense that I tried to pass as white as possible growing up, and then went to Chinese school and Chinese church on the weekends, just like dual life, code switching all the time. And I think we've talked about, that yes, there's some benefits. And I think, I don't know, maybe getting into graduate school was beneficial because I checked the diversity box and I checked the female box and whatever, and the work hard box. And yet at the same time, it may have opened those doors, but it didn't protect me from any of the other stuff that came in terms of feeling the otherness, the discrimination, the microaggressions, the
Yeah.
Oh, why are you speaking up? You don't do that. People like you who look like you don't do that. And so it came at a cost in terms of feeling silenced, feeling like I didn't have a voice or I couldn't advocate for myself. And I think too, I also internalized that sense of like, you can't speak up for other people either. So I think this whole Black Lives Matter situation too has pointed out a lot of, my feelings of how I've internalized the model minority as I have to protect myself, but I can't get involved, right, with these bigger issues because it's not my fight and we're not them. We haven't experienced that. So how can we be involved? And I think that has been the most damaging piece of how our culture has very much fell silent in terms of social justice issues at many times. So yeah, there was a significant cost. And now I think I'm realizing like, crap, I don't want my kids to grow up like this, And I think also culturally, my parents were very into obedience. So I was never taught to speak up. I was never taught to advocate for myself. And if I couldn't do that as a child with my parents, where there was safety and there was love, how was I going to do that in the real world? And so now for my own kids, I have to stop myself and be like, obedience is not the goal, right? Like the goal is independence. The goal is empowerment. The goal is you finding a voice young enough that you can say no and you can set boundaries and you can advocate for yourself. So it's a lot of unlearning, even now, it's like a almost 40-year-old. So
I think
it's heavy stuff. I like that word, unlearning. And you're right, advocacy. I want to say and this may divert a little bit, but this is a good example of model minority in the schools, the model minority myth placed on a family in the schools, where I did see a family, the child was expelled, Asian American family, but they came to me to help the child, the teen. He was extremely angry, and when I uncovered things, in reality, I'll be honest with you, I believe it was a case of racism. And again, and also the family not advocating for their child because of the obedience, being like, you know what, our son did probably cause trouble to get expelled. He probably deserved it, not because they didn't love their son and thought that way about him, just because of the culture. And you don't speak up to an authority figure, especially in the schools, and a principal, let alone. So he was expelled really for, as I delved deeper, for reasons where I did not think was appropriate. And I did let them know that, especially the teen, which in the end helped him emotionally. That's what it does. Mental health and the model minority can do a number on that. And he never felt that, I don't even talk about sense of belonging, acceptance that what he was experiencing wasn't right. He knew he was angry, but couldn't pinpoint, why am I so angry? Yeah, I was expelled, but that's not it. The other kid got off scot-free.
Right.
But he was the one that started it. And so I found out, and it took about a long time to figure this all out and delve deep and then talk to school officials. Probably one of the most rewarding cases because I got to advocate years later in adulthood for this family. He was still expelled. I can't backtrack that because by the time they saw him, it was a year into it. But I got to have this meeting and kind of almost change school policy of what they did because I actually didn't use the word racism. I wish I didn't use that word now, but this is like 3.5 years ago. I didn't use that word. I wish I had, but I did use the word microaggression. So to share about that story, I'm just sharing with you a teenager who could have gone in a certain direction because of his extreme anger, felt justified. And you brought up the word advocacy, so I just felt empowered to share that's what the model minority could look like, where a kid could lose his way, not to blame his parents, just that's the culture. And they kept hushing him, and they really actually got very angry with him. Why are you so mad? You have no right. You got expelled, but just didn't look deeper. And then it was helping me help them understand the system too.
And I think
I'll divert on that, but yeah, I had to share about that case.
I think that offers us a good segue into why this model minority myth causes so many emotional problems, right? And mental health issues as well, right? I think that being a mental health podcast, we should probably try to integrate that into the conversation, right? And so I guess I can start us off, right? When we talk about expectations and we talk about cultural pressure, right? Outside of just our own, in addition to, well, we can go an entire episode or more on our own cultural values and how that impacts our own mental health. I mean, we touched on it before, but we could talk all day about that. But specifically, like the model minority myth, right? The idea that we're supposed to be silent and we're supposed to just take what the system gives us, right? I think that is a very important factor in considering when we're talking about mental health, because that is what makes us feel powerless, right? Whether it's in schools, whether it's in like our experiences with I don't know if I told a story about me being like detained for as a middle school kid, being detained because I fit somebody's description for somebody who like robbed a house, and I'm an Asian guy, right? And you're like, you know, you think it'd be okay, right? I can't imagine what it would be if I had been like somebody who's like Latino or something like that in like this area. But yeah, so the expectation that you don't question and you don't fight back, right? So I asked the cop questions, right? And it was like, so what's going on, right? And what's happening? I don't think he was expecting that, because he's just like, oh, it's an Asian kid, you know, he's just gonna like sit there, be quiet, I'll call his parents, and it's like, we're gonna get this sorted out or whatever. I don't know what was going through his head, and I'm not gonna bother trying to parse through that, right? But it's the expectation that the systems and authorities are here to disempower us, and as Asians, we just take it because we can rise above that, i.e. the examples of internment and afterwards, right? Or the fact that, I mean, we can talk all day about the history of Chinatowns too, right? But the whole idea that, oh, we'll just figure out a way. And I think that we internalize that. When I work with a lot of adolescents who have anxiety and depression, a lot of it is just internalized, like, I can't do anything about anything, and it's just here, and I don't fit this, and I can't do anything. And that is the mental health piece that we see as clinicians. I don't know if you all agree with me, but as clinicians, that's what we see. This is the side effect of a system that has chosen to disempower us because we're supposed to fit their pretty little picture of what we're supposed to be. And we internalize that. And because we're in between cultures, right? We're not our parents who are immigrants and they have their own identities, pretty thoroughly developed. We, as Asian Americans, developing our identities in a duality of cultures means that we're kind of, where are we, you know? And that doesn't help us in trying to figure out and establishing that firm, like, this is who I am, this is what I can be confident about, and this is how I can speak up. And those are common themes that have come up today, right? So I see that in the anxiety and depression. It's like, I can't do anything about this. I'm hopeless. I don't meet the educational, I'm not the academic brainiac that everybody wants me to be. I'm not the obedient, not active, not non-activist that I'm supposed to be, right? And I think that those things are really drivers of those. That's how I would tie the model minority myth to mental health, in that they come out in these ways, and we aren't always aware of how that happens. And so what are some of your examples? I'm sure that you have plenty of examples, either from personal experience or from your clients.
I think in my work with, because I only work with women, and a lot of them are Asian American, one of the biggest themes is this idea that they're just never good enough. I mean, it's simply put, right? And so the internalized model minority myth is this sense that I'm an imposter, that everybody's going to see that I actually don't know what I'm doing. And if I try to speak up, people are going to think I'm dumb. And so a lot of it then creates the silencing, right? That we internalize that. And so we start to censor and silence ourselves because of fear that we're going to be exposed. And so I think the model minority myth, as it relates to Asian Americans, is it fundamentally rocks our sense of identity, We don't know who we are. We don't know what we can do and what we're capable of, because we also are not being told to be courageous and step outside the box at all. And so when we think about, careers, right? We think about, you only have doctor, lawyer, engineer. Those are options, right? Or you don't go into the entertainment industry. You don't pursue music unless it's like classic violin, piano soloist, right?
Or
and
you're
so
a
there's
prodigy.
right, or you're a prodigy. So there's these very
That's triggering me.
So there are these tiny targets that we're all trying to reach, but it's impossible. We're never going to reach them. And so I see that play out in lots of feelings of dysphoria and depression, because you feel that in your core, there's something wrong with you. It's never the system. We never think it's the system that's messed up and was never created for us in the first place. And then the other piece is, like you mentioned, the anxiety. Like every time there's a meeting for work, every time you need to present, every time you are representing you, your people, your parents, all of these people who are on your shoulders being like, you better show up today and you better be at 200%. I mean, it's so debilitating. Exactly. And exhausting. So those are some of the themes that I see in terms of clinical work.
Yeah, and you said it. I say the model minority is a social construct. So, because if we're talking about narrative therapy, Chris, I think you mentioned that, just being able to separate it, externalize it, is very important. And that I do that in a lot of my work, because I'm doing it to myself as well. I'm my worst. What do you say? I compete with myself.
Yeah.
Jeannie Chang versus Jeannie Chang. Who can up the person? Each other. It's terrible. So it's a big part of who I am. So I work hard at externalizing it and not letting that define me. But I love that, Jeannie. I resonated personally, and I see it in my clients, especially college students, because by then they've reached that point of, who am I? I just left home. I'm so done with my culture. But I want to say it's the whole concept of identity, definitely an identity crisis, And when you're in any kind of crisis, emotionally, that does a number on you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think it's just so not fair of not meeting people where they are, right? I remember at one point, in hindsight, I had some racist teachers, right? They would pick on me at the weirdest times. I got kicked out of a classroom once because I was laughing during a pizza party, and everyone else was laughing, and I was like, this doesn't make sense, right? And I remember complaining about it and being like, or complaining I don't understand this topic in school, right? And my parents' response was always, we came here and we didn't know English and we got degrees. Shut up, right? And I was like, oh, well, I guess I can't argue with that logic. And it just sucked because I didn't get the help that I needed at the time, right?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, and it's that same concept too of, I really want to harp on the fact that this only applies to East Asians, right? There's so many other Asians that people have no idea who they are, what they are, and meet them where they're at. They just lump them in wherever they can. In our talks about identity, we're just trying to be validated. We use that word a lot, but we want to be heard and we want to be seen for who we actually are, not some preconceived notion.
Right.
And I think that's so hard, because like we're in this in between, right? We're in this in between where, to a certain extent, we don't even know how to define ourselves, right? We want certain things that are so distinctly Western, and then we are some things that are so distinctly Eastern, and it's just like, how do we navigate that? And then when we're trying to establish our own identity as Asian Americans, as I alluded to before, like, we stack on this expectation that everybody's got of us, whether it's our parents' expectation, which is different sometimes from what society expects from us too, as quote unquote the model minority, right? And then just having to like find that in between, and then you do run the risk of like being not Asian enough in some situations, or not white enough in some certain situations. And I think that's just like, it's Asian immigrants have their own struggles, but we as Asian Americans also have like this weird struggle too of being in between. And I think navigating that has been very difficult for a lot of people. And yeah.
It's important to change that language of you keep saying we're in between. We're not in between anything. We are our own identity. That's the problem, is the fact that we keep comparing ourselves to other identities because we need to be those other identities. We shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to live by anyone else's standards. We should be okay with being Asian Americans. We have our own specific, unique identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it has always felt in between because those narratives have never been written by us.
That's right.
Right. And so I think I feel a sense that that's changing. Like this generation is like, hell no, we're going to lead the podcast. We're going to make the movies. We're going to do what feels like is us for the first time. And I think our parents lacked the resources and knowledge and awareness to do that because they were just trying to struggle and make it here. And now I think people are like, we're going to tell the stories ourselves. And we're going to stop letting other people tell those for us.
I think that's definitely what we're seeing, is that people are we're starting to own that voice, our place. We're establishing our place, right? I think with the entire like subtle Asian business that that we're a part of, right? That is owning our own voice. And it's funny because it started in Australia. And here we are, just like, okay, this is happening, and then.
Well, and I was gonna just tag along to that. It's also, did you hear about? I think a friend of mine told me when Crazy Rich Asians first came out, we thought it was a win, but then Cambodians and the Southeast Asians did not see. They were actually very upset by the movie because they felt like they were not represented. They were not represented in the rich Asian culture. And I'm bringing that up because I also want, as we ourselves, we can also advocate for our fellow Asians, right? Just in that space of, we are very diverse. We are not one homogeneous group, which, by the way, even as of last week, people just assume Chang is a Chinese last name.
Correct.
I get it, but I'm like, no, I'm Korean. They're like,
are you though?
And they'll actually look at me like I'm going, yes, I am Korean. Like,
I would know.
What else do I need to say? And they're like, oh, and this is a fellow Asian. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to prove it. Like, you want me to speak Korean? I mean, but why I'm bringing that up is even that still exists when you were saying, even among other Asians, you can have that, I don't know if that's next to model minority, but just the fact that we're not all homogeneous and still we have been, trained to think that way too. So that's why I really resonated when Jenny said unlearning it.
Yeah.
Like I had to unlearn that woman saying, no, Chang came from, I don't know, the Changs, Korean Changs and Chinese Changs, I don't know, mixed. And that's how I came about. I don't know. I married a Chang, but I just thought it's funny because I was trying to explain my last name to somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I watch a lot of film, and like you said, Crazy Rich Asians was a big win for us in the sense that it showed white culture that you can make money off of Asian films. So that helped promote other avenues, other media, other lead actors. But for me, the biggest wins were films that weren't Asian, but had Asian characters. Like Better Luck Tomorrow was probably the original one, right? And I watched a recent film that I really liked. It's called The Other Half of It. I don't want to go
all that, but I didn't watch it.
It's a beautiful film, and it's essentially a high school coming of age love story, and has to do with sexual identity that just happens to have an Asian lead. They don't focus on her being Asian. She's just another person, and that's what I thought was so beautiful about that story.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, I mean, this is such a big topic. Do we have any last minute thoughts or messages we really want to get across to folks about the model minority and mental health? Let's start with Jenny.
Okay.
I know. Just quick message. Something that's pressing on your heart you want to get across?
just start asking questions, start observing, right? How these themes might be pervading in your life. I think we all have to start somewhere in this kind of like identity process of figuring out what this all means to us. But have conversations, right, with other Asian Americans and other Asians about how this has happened for you. And maybe start questioning some of the things that you've assumed to be true your entire life, and I hope, this provides some way of maybe living differently one day or changing some things of how you want to live. So.
Jet?
The struggle is real. And you don't have to fit neatly into a box. I think the less we think about having to be certain things, right? We're all therapists here, with the exception of the one person who has a doctorate degree. But,
Jenny, no.
I'm a therapist.
Therapist as well. But also with like.
Did you just pull a model minority move? No, I'm kidding.
What I'm trying to say is that we don't have to live up to the expectations of whatever our parents have of us, right? Or we can blaze our own paths, and I think it's hard to do, but you're not alone in trying to do that, right? All of us here are therapists. We took an unconventional path, right? We're not the model minority. We do social service work. We're not engineers. We are not doctors. Exception. But we are proof that you can do things that don't fit into the box. And we're here to show you that we're working with you to also break these bamboo ceilings. We're blazing paths in territories that people don't see us in traditionally. And we hope that what people see is that this is necessary and that our stories are important, not just to us, but to other people as well. And that we hope that you can see through this that there are alternative paths. And yeah, that's what I want to say.
I mean, it's pretty much the same thing that I would say, right? I don't care who you are. We are predominantly Asian space, but I don't care who's watching this. You're allowed to succeed. You're allowed to fail. You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to feel whatever it is that you feel. Never let anyone else dictate who you are.
Ditto to everyone. And I just might add, because you've heard from our experiences, this is so cheesy, but we're all in this together. We've all experienced it. We're all experiencing it. You're not alone. I think that's one of the things that I felt growing up, that I felt like I was alone in this experience. I think Black Lives Matter, the movement itself now has helped bridge that gap once and for all. I hope change is uncomfortable, but I see hope. So I want to say there's hope out there, guys. You hear from us. We couldn't break it down even in the last 40 minutes really well for you, but at least we shared our personal experiences with it and know that it's a journey and it's cyclical, not linear. But I guess I want to say that thank you for listening to this heavy episode, or this rich episode full of digestible bites of mental health.
Or we just hope that you don't get indigestion from this.
No, we hope you don't get indigestion, but we hope you'll join us next week.
Yep.
Bye, y'all.
Next week.